If you have downloaded your first pattern, you are ready for the next stage, cutting out. This video shows you how to lay out your pattern and cut your fabric. I have cut a pattern to half scale just to show you how to lay out the pieces. I have also cut a piece of denim fabric to the same scale. This particular denim is 54 inches wide, which is roughly 140 centimeters. Everyone loves denim. This one's a bit special. It has 3% lycra, which really hugs the figure. This is the lengthwise grain of the fabric, and this is the crosswise grain. The edge of the fabric is called the selvage. It doesn't fray, and it can be used for trimming. For the majority of layouts, you fold the fabric in half with the right side to the inside. My pinafore dress pattern consists of a skirt and a separate bodice. The center front of the skirt and the bodice have to be placed on a fold. There is a seam down the center back with an invisible zip that comes to about here, and that just leaves the pockets, which are optional. All we have to do now is just pin the pattern to the fabric. I like to use a pin cushion to keep my pins tidy. Don't use a magnet. I've always found you pick up 10 at a time once they're magnetized. Pin each piece all the way around, keeping the pattern nice and flat. Make sure you leave enough space in between the pieces for your seam allowance and for the hem. Before pinning each piece down, just check that it's aligned along the straight grain. Use a tape measure or a ruler to check that the grain line is parallel with either the selvage edge or the folded edge. Before you do any cutting out, make sure that you've left enough room for the seam allowances and for the hem. I always try to cut with economy in mind, and I don't like to waste fabric. If I'm going to have bits left over, I'd rather they were large bits, which I can use for a new project. So it is often better to fold the fabric differently. This layout leaves you with two thin strips that you can't do anything with. Instead of folding your fabric in half, fold it just enough to get your pattern pieces on. At least then you have a nice wide strip that you can use as a waistband, or cut some pockets, or even cover some buttons. But make sure that your fold is parallel to the selvage so that everything is still on the straight grain. A few words about equipment. You don't need very much. Just a decent tape measure, some pins. Chalk is good. This is a clever gadget for keeping your chalk sharp. A gauge like this one is useful. It helps you with all the little measurements that seem so common when you're dressmaking. pair of cutting out scissors. Keep them just for fabric. Paper is inclined to blunt them. Let's start cutting out for real. Don't forget to mark your hem before you cut out your skirt pieces. Err on the side of long, you can always cut it shorter. To start with, you might want to measure your seam allowances. The standard is 5/8 of an inch. You can always add a bit more for fitting. But it won't be long before you can just cut it by eye. Double check everything before you start cutting. It really is that easy to get your pattern cut out. You don't need to follow a plan. Fit the pieces on the fabric how you like. You may decide to use a contrast fabric for the skirt and bodice. And that way you can use up remnants, or perhaps some contrasting pockets. Whatever you do will be totally original, true couture. Next, we need to transfer the markings from pattern to fabric. Look out for my next 2 videos, which will show you the best methods.